Hello everyone, I am back to be reviewing the sophomore studio album by the avant-garde young pop sensation Billie Eilish. This album, titled Happier Than Ever, comes 2 years after her smash hit debut record, When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go, in 2019. This album, along with its predecessor, was produced entirely by her brother Finneas. So it's a very tight-knit group they have together, with only them inputting into the music making of this record. And so because of that, it's very identifiably and, audibly a Billie Eilish project. Her vocal style, her singing delivery is very eclectic, it's very unique, and it's very her. And that carries through brilliantly into the evolution she is displaying here 2 years later on this record. Billie is only, I think, just about 20 years old now. I'm not entirely sure if she's turned 20 yet. I think she's turning 20 this year, but she's still 19. So she's still very young. And, Billie has always been sort of one of the first artists, I feel, of Gen Z to really come up in the scene that represents a generation that I almost feel a bit old for. I think that's more Olivia Rodrigo, though, because Olivia Rodrigo is even 2 years younger than Billie. So Billie is moving on a little bit beyond just talking about high school relationships in her new project. And there are a couple tracks that allude to the fact that she is much older now, which, she's still considering, at 28, it's hard for you to remember at 19, 20 that you did start to feel old. But back then, looking at it now, I'm like, you're so young, you're so young. There's such wisdom and maturity to the lyrics on this project that I think belie I don't think we often see from a lot of artists of Billie's age, considering a lot of this was probably written when she was only 18. This album is truly a remarkable project from her, and as you will see in this review, I have a lot of glowing things to say about it. I was really, really, really worried, and I think a lot of people were sort of projecting this onto her just because it's a popular thing to do, to sort of tear down an artist who's been in their prime, that they're going to be a one-hit wonder, that, the fact that she did sweep the 2020 Grammy Awards so epically, I think has put a lot of target on her back for people to say, I want to see you fail. I'll be honest, I do think Billie maybe should have not swept maybe Billie won a few Grammys that maybe it would have been nice to see the love spread around a little bit more. But I'm not saying she didn't deserve it. It's the Grammys. We're not going to get into that whole conversation. The Grammys do not mean anything. We all know this. But with that being said, I am so, so proud and so elated to be listening to this record and to not only really enjoy it, but to actually think that it's a real step in the right direction for her. I think it's an album I enjoy infinitely more than her debut, which might be a little controversial. I'm not sure how many Billie fans would feel the same way. I think that this album is actually a much more accessible way of getting into Billie Eilish's aesthetic and her sound, but it doesn't compromise any of her uniqueness. Any of that edginess, any of that raw power that she had is still there. The lyrics are as open and gutted and wounded as ever. And yet there is, of course, a maturity. As I said, there's a slight less victim conscious side of her that's coming in and saying, things are going to be okay. We don't need to going completely and down the dark end, with that line, I want to end me and bury a friend coming to mind. That ultra emo gothic kind of lyricism is balanced out by some really emotional by some really wise, anecdotes about growing up and getting older and dealing with pain and heartbreak in a way that makes Billie sound as liberated and as in a much better healthy headspace than she was before. And so we all love to see that. We don't want to see Billie struggle with depression. And yet at the same time, I wasn't entirely sure if Billie was entirely leaving her sad girl image behind. This album rollout and the promotion of it has been kind of confusing to me. I'm not going to lie. Altogether, seeing the entire picture now that we have the full record, I kind of get where she was going with the singles that she chose to release and when she chose to release them. But it was definitely a little all over the place. We were getting the beautiful, jazzy, soulful, sultry My Future, which was the first real single from the record that came out exactly a year ago as of this month, which if you've watched my top 30 songs of 2020 video, you will recall that song garnered the #1 spot on my list of my favorite songs of the year. and it wasn't even attached to an album at that point. I knew it was coming for an album, and we knew the album was coming, but it was the song that really perked my ears up for Billie and made me think, oh my gosh, what could she deliver here? This soundscape she was painting with that song was just so, it fit so well for her style of vocal, which is ultra delicate, ultra restrained, ultra soft. And then there's just layers added sometimes to give it some backbone when it needs to. One of the things that I really, really love about this record that I don't think she utilized nearly as much on her debut is the use of layered vocals for harmonies. There's just a lot of beautifully, delicately layered, soft vocals that harmonize so wonderfully with her main lead. And I think that she's really leaning towards a much more feminine delivery than maybe she was on her debut. I think on her debut, there was so much of that whisper singing, which became sort of a trope of hers, that kind of led into the trap rap territory just a little bit. And I think she was really trying to like lean into that style, and with the production being very bass heavy, as it is on this record too when it comes to it. This album is almost more minimally produced than her debut. I would argue there's so much similarity, you can tell it's a Finneas project, but at the same time I think there's a like elevated less is more technique in which he decided to take out a lot of the crushing, you know, pounding industrial electronics and focus on just giving it to us when it would really make a mark. It comes at you sometimes unexpectedly when it's very soft synths layered up behind her vocals, and you really get into it. It's like you're not really sure if this is an up-tempo song or if this is going to get really slow again. I think there's just a real great deconstruction of a traditional pop song going on with so much of the melodies and the compositions instrumentally and sonically with a lot of these songs. And that's what I think she really did make a big F you to radio and pop radio. You know, her hit song Bad Guy, you see iterations of that song coming up on some of the songs on this record. You see songs that could be a successor. But at the same time, I think all of the songs that are going in that direction are much smarter than Bad Guy was, because they just sound like they're cohesive together as a project in which you don't really think, oh, this is a standout single. You just think, no, this is a body of work that needs to be listened to from start to finish. And so once again, using the power of the album instead of relying on just singles and that algorithm to just generate sales on radio is something that I think Billie was really going for on this project, and it really shows. I'll go through the track list, talk about all of my thoughts on it. I've got so much to say, and this video will be quite lengthy, I am sure, because we've got 16 songs. However, I do just want to lament that, in my opinion, one song was cruelly snubbed. The official first single she gave us after the When We All Fall Asleep era had come to a close, Everything I Wanted, which was released in the autumn of 2019. It had a music video, it had just so much power behind it, and yet it is glaringly omitted from this record. I don't know if, you know, on the Japan edition, they usually throw in extra tracks over there, or on a bonus edition somewhere, it's included at the very end. But in my playlist, it has been included. I changed the album artwork. Everything I Wanted belongs on this project. I don't even think it doesn't fit even in the thematic of it, because I mean, this album does feel somewhat like she's going through the last 2 years chronologically. And I don't know if the song would necessarily go at the very end, but it definitely, I think, belongs in the headspace and the journey she's been going through. So I don't know why she didn't include it. It's very puzzling to me. There's also 1 or 2 songs that she could have easily swapped out, and I would have not missed their absence to include Everything I Wanted instead. One song in particular, which happens to be the closing song, and I'll get to that. Album, we've got the album art. Now, I will say the album art was another thing that really disappointed me. The first album had such a eye-grabbing album cover. It represented the fury and the craziness and the manicness of the first record so wonderfully. The, you know, eeriness. This album, I mean, look, she's obviously not wanting to appear as manic and as, you know, possessed by demons this time around. And I get that. She's wanting to kind of portray a calmer, softer, you know, wise beyond her years version of herself. And I love how that comes through in the lyrics and in the songwriting. But the one area that I do lament that not having a little bit more of that eye-popping, you know, wow factor is the album cover. I think the album cover suffers from being just very generic. It's a very plain background. The pose, it just looks like something she did for Vogue. It honestly looks like a throwaway cover photo for a magazine that she thought, let's put that as an album cover. Even the font for the placement of it, of the title and the weird, it just doesn't feel balanced in the way I would like it to. There were just a lot of decisions being made. It reminds me a lot of Ariana Grande's Sweetener album cover, which I think is one of the worst album covers to come from a pop star in recent years. If I ever make the worst album covers video on this channel, which I probably won't, I don't like really talking about things I don't like, but Sweetener by Ariana Grande, that album cover is absolutely atrocious. Does not sell the album well at all, does not represent, it's just horrible. It's just an ugly cover, it's an ugly shot, very generic. And unfortunately, this album cover is only just a few steps above that. It's a beautiful shot, but it's nothing more, and it doesn't make me really interested in what conceptually this album is going to bring us. So that is a bit of a disappointment. You know, on top of that, I will be honest with you, there were a couple singles where I just really wasn't sure where she was going here. Lost Cause being one of them, one of the more recent singles where I just wasn't really getting into it. I was like, great, I love that Billie is out of her sad girl era and that she's having fun with her friends, but I'm missing something deeper here. And I don't know, it just, compared to songs like My Future and Everything I Wanted, I just felt like we were making such a leap in less than a year. And I just felt like there was so much in between that we weren't getting, which luckily we do get on this record. It's just, again, she chose to represent the album so bipolarly with the singles that she released ahead of time. Let's get into it. Track number 1, Getting Older. I'll be honest with you, the production and the melody of this song is completely forgettable to me. But as an album intro, and considering we've got so many songs on this project, I completely forgive it. It's, you know, a great way to introduce us to the theme of this record overall, which is the idea of growing up and learning to deal with vulnerability in a much more, you know, wizened way. Because the synth beat is just, you know, it's just there to keep the tune. It's just there to keep the pace. It's entirely focused on what Billie is saying. Maybe it was one of the last tracks she wrote on the record because it would make sense from it to be coming from a place where she's looking back at everything she's done in the last 2 years since her debut. There are some very telling lyrics on this one that I think have some fans a little concerned that she might not be as into the music industry and continuing on that path as she was when she was 17. I'm getting older. I think I'm aging well. I wish someone had told me I'd be doing this by myself. There's reasons that I'm thankful. There's a lot I'm grateful for. But it's different when a stranger's always waiting at your door. Which is ironic because the strangers seem to want me more than anyone before. Too bad they're usually deranged. In the chorus, things I once enjoyed just keep me employed now. Things I'm longing for, someday I'll be bored of. It's so weird that we care so much until we don't. This is a very wise way of describing how in time you look back at something even a year later and you can realize, and if you know this at the time looking into the future, that in the grand scheme of things, a lot of things that we get fixated on do not matter to us in a year or two. And it's very easy to get tripped up by, you know, a shiny thing or something you're really obsessed with, a boyfriend or something. But in a year's time, you'll look back and it'll be just a blip. Also, she's reflecting on the fact that, yeah, I think she really is realizing that this whole glitzy, glamorous Hollywood lifestyle that she's thrown herself into with award shows and music videos and all of this is probably not exactly what she wanted to sign up for in the long run. She didn't really get a lot of time to grow up as a normal teenager because of it, and she's just kind of sick of the grind of it. And that doesn't mean that I don't think she's falling out of love with music or creating. I just think that obviously she's saying F you to mainstream radio and to mainstream labels and saying, look, I want to go forward and just do things for me. I don't want to worry about what song is going to chart or what single would play better with this demographic. I want to just make music for me and not worry about, you know, having to sell out stadiums and not worry about how much, you know, airplay this song might be getting. She's probably going to be fine financially anyway. Considering Finneas is launching his own music career as well, they can boost each other up. I think that she's really just lamenting on the fact that, and a cautionary tale to a lot of other young stars, that, you know, fame, again, as a lot of stars say, is not everything, and it can be really boring. And I love how, like, she just, you know, dryly admits, without feeling any sort of, like, caution around, you know, offending anyone, that these things are really messed up. And also, in the territory that comes with fame, you meet a lot of wackos. And that's something she explores more in those lyrics she gives us in the later tracks. I'm getting older, I got more on my shoulders, but I'm getting better at admitting when I'm wrong. I'm happier than ever, at least that's my endeavor, to keep myself together and prioritize my pleasure. Because to be honest, I just wish that what I promise would depend on what I'm given, not on his permission. Wasn't my decision to be abused. Real cliffhanger there. Was a real cliffhanger at the end of this track to drop that like bombshell. And of course, that's a staple of Billie's lyrics. You know, you never know what kind of glaring confession is going to come at the next stanza. And Billie has been vocal about talking about abuse and seeing others being abused in this industry, young women. And there's a song that deals with it so heartbreakingly well. And I'll get to that. So yeah, getting older, just it's giving us the rundown of where she's been and where her head has been over the last several years. And it's more for the lyrics than it is for anything else because it honestly not anything special in terms of production or anything. I didn't change my number. Track number 2. We have a snarling dog opening this up, which you know really changes up the energy. I didn't change my number. I only changed who I reply to. I mean, that's basically the way of summing up, you know, how in this album she's obviously so done with this relationship or relationships in general. There's a real F men energy to this track, to a lot of these songs. Apparently, the sample is a pit bull of Eilish's named Shark, so one of her pets contributes to that. Towards the end, we get some deliciously robotic and very glaring electro glitch industrial pulsing coming in, and it does feel very alien. It's a great blend of, you know, the slight hip hop production mixed with a very electronic industrial production that transports you in a very jarring way that I think once you get accustomed to is just so Billie and it's so Finneas and something I love seeing on this record. Leading us out on the outro, you ruined everything good, always said you were misunderstood, made all my moments your own, just fucking leave me alone. She said it. She said it. Okay, on Billie Bossa Nova. Like the title implies, she is taking her own spin on a Latin style of jazz music that's very sultry and sensual, which I think she is credited largely to Antonio Carlos Jobim, a Brazilian artist who is considered the godfather of Brazil's bossa nova scene. Apparently, she was spending a lot of time listening to his records in the hiatus, and so it was a real inspiration for the style in this track. The breezy guitars are so unique for the rest of this record in some ways because there's such a break from the edgy, you know, underbelly kind of production that Finneas is usually accustomed to, which makes it sound like it's produced by an entirely different team. And I really applaud Finneas for branching out and making a song and producing one that sounds like it wasn't made by him at all. And of course, Billie as well, going into a style of singing that is a lot more melodic than she's accustomed to, I think, in a lot of her other songs. And that's another thing I just want to really give a shout out for because I think this album is so much more melodic than her first album was. I think there's so much more of an emphasis on carrying a tune through to its conclusion and really crafting a melody that sticks with you, but is also very, you know, fluid and just very beautiful to listen to. And I think that that's something I really have an ear for, if you know my channel. And one of the reasons why this album stands out to me so much more than its predecessor. My Future, you already know. I can't spend too much time talking about it because this review is going to be very long. I will link my track review of that song in the description. Highly recommend you check that out if you haven't seen, because I can only glow about that song and sort of the overall narrative of its portrayal about time and passage of it and romance, giving us, you know, a taste of something we don't often see a lot of, especially young pop stars sing about, which is something that I, as a more introverted individual, have always resonated with, which is that loving yourself ultimately and being excited about the potential of growth for yourself is almost more exciting than constantly worrying about someone else's, you know, coming into your life and fixing you. Why does that have to always be the narrative that we see in society? Because that can really weigh you down. Why not just be in love with who you're going to be? I do think I will just say Billy Bossa Nova definitely in that sensual pose. It gives you that feeling of, light cloth, light fabric, a little bit of shoulder. It's perfectly embodying the, sensual energy that is underneath a lot of these newer songs because that is the energy she's going for. It's less in the dark and, chaotic in that regard. So Oxytocin, if there was a song that, like I said, is coming for bad guy, it's that song. Um, Oxytocin is a ride. It's a ride and a half. I actually had a really fun experience with this song because I first listened to this album on Friday when it came out in headphones. I was actually in the Adirondacks on this beautiful lake on a canoe. It was like an inflatable one, so you could just like lean back on it. And I just like, it was really windy, so the wind was really blowing. And so I was drifting very far down the river. And I just like had this song on. I had the whole album on. And when this song came on in particular, it felt so good to just like be laying back and having the waves just move you down the lake, and staring up at the sky and the clouds. I can't explain it, but there's a real movement. There's some real movement to this song that really fit the vibe that was coming from that. But this is, seductive, devil may care Billy. This is more of the Billy we're accustomed to as well. Oxytocin is often considered the chemical of lust or love in the brain and neurological science, the love hormone, and it's released during acts of hugging or sexual activity. If the walls could talk of clandestine activities between what I would love to do to you. And of course, this is all kind of a fantasy that she's having late at night. It's giving a bit of self-pleasure energy. Can't take it back once it's been set in motion. You know I love to rub it in like lotion. I love just, again, like I said, the bobbing aspect, propulsive aspect of this song in the backing. And we get the breakdown, jarbled production that allows her to, get some grunge grit out of her lungs in the expression of some of those vocals towards the end. You should really run away. This song, I mean, I think is begging for a music video. I just wonder how how absolutely filthy it would be. Some people joke that because of the sinfulness of Oxytocin, she had to follow up the next track with a very devout and pious sounding heavenly song in Goldwing. I was absolutely floored at the first half of this song. I never imagined that Billie would make something so classical and choral out of her vocal layering, but it's so elegant. I mean, Enya comes to mind. I mean, there is just such a pristine quality to the softness of her voice, layered so beautifully that she sounds like a chorus of angels singing in a church. And it's got a very Catholic feel to it and a very powerful grounding presence. And yeah, it's so angelic. I was really, really blown away. I believe it's an excerpt from some sort of devotional prayer. He hath come to the bosom of his beloved, smiling on him, she beareth him to highest heaven with yearning heart. On thee we gaze, O gold-winged messenger of mighty gods. Gold-wing referring to that. Gold-winged angel. This is the verses now that we've had the instrumental break. And there's a bit of a sample that's looped of her in that, very pious choral moment that backbones this track. Gold-winged angel, go home, don't tell anyone what you are. You're sacred and they're starved, and their art is getting dark. And there you are to tear apart. You better keep your head down. They're going to tell you what you want to hear, then they're going to disappear. Going to claim you like a souvenir just to sell you in a year. Billie is, giving a lifeline here to the women of the industry who are being abused by these, men in high positions of power and like record labels and in the industry, and how their art will be commodified and their trauma exploited. And that it's going to feel really difficult to keep your head above water through all of that. And she, in a way, wants to be that angel to help them, be lifted up from that muck because she has been there herself. And so she's a, lifeline that she is trying to cast to all of the other women who felt like they couldn't make vulnerable music about their trauma and not feel like they're exposing someone or betraying someone that doesn't have their best interest at heart. that there is a higher cause that needs to be allowed to shine through, and that is overcoming, and which is speaking truth to power, and saying, I've had enough. I am this goddess, and you're not going to treat me like this anymore. So, track number 7, Lost Cause. I've already kind of explained my thoughts on this one. I think that it's a great moment, a summer song, carefree, lackadaisical, and also a big, again, FU to a guy who's treated her and, potentially her girlfriends really cruddily. And she's had, she's just not giving giving any Fs, so to speak. You ain't nothing but a lost cause. You think you're such an outlaw, but you got no job. Calling you out on your broke ass. And so, she's allowed to have that kind of, that sentiment on this record because she's gone through a lot and she's just with her friends, eating Lay's potato chips, playing Twister. Love a good game of Twister. Having a really fun time. I think it was my bitter, sad girl self, that sad boy self watching the music video thinking, I'm jealous that Billie gets to have so much fun. Like, I want to have fun and I don't quite have that in my life a lot of the time. That support system that is always there for you on call to just have fun and, even involve alcohol, which is, a whole other thing. I love how she doesn't really promote alcohol so much in her videos and in her music. It's more just like, going to the mall and eating donuts or like kind of more childlike ways of having fun, playing board games. I like that she's using that imagery instead of just showing her at a club. Like she's at a house, she's at her friend's house, or they're at an apartment and just eating chips and having a fun time, drinking Sierra Mist or whatever. It doesn't have to be, in a bar, in a club, like alcohol based. So for the people who are not into drinking, I like that. I don't know if Billie is personally not a drinker or anything, but I really am cognizant of that, even if she's not so aware of it, because I don't know. It's just a lot of young artists that's like the alcohol is very prominent in all of their visuals, especially a song like this, you would expect it to be. Yeah, I'm here for it, but I've got to be real with you. The melody of it just doesn't actually really take off for me. It's a fun sing-along song with your friends. It's nothing more for me. And so it's a song that I personally wouldn't skip it. None of this album doesn't have really any skips, except for perhaps the final song. But I'm not like raving home about it compared to some of the other tracks we've got given to us here. Halley's Comet, or is it Halley's Comet? I always thought it was pronounced Halley's Comet. This is one of the most unabashed love songs. This is the one song where she actually isn't really riffing on a jaded, post-breakup FU kind of sentiment. She's admitting that she's falling into this fantasy, this lustful fantasy over someone. Maybe it's someone that she doesn't actually personally know, but she's only seen from a distance, maybe on the internet or something like that, or peripherally. And she kind of knows that it's dangerous for her to want him because this person is very inaccessible, or maybe this person is actually quite toxic. It's just, you sometimes can't help if you just have a feeling towards someone, even if you know it deep down, you're probably not compatible. And in the long run, it'd probably be disastrous. You can't help but think about and find yourself dreaming about this person a lot. I can certainly relate to that. And so I don't want it, and I don't want that I want you, but in my dreams, I seem to be more honest, and I must admit you've been in quite a few. Halley's Comet comes around more than I do, but you're all it takes for me to break a promise. Silly me to fall in love with you. So let me Google here, how often does Halley's Comet come around? So Halley is the only known short-period comet that is regularly visible to the naked eye from Earth, but it only comes around every 75 to 76 years. So it's the only comet that could potentially appear twice in a human's lifetime, because it's technically, in the cosmic scale of things, a short-period perihelion, which is the name of its orbital rotation around the sun. So, Halley, it doesn't come around too often. So I think that's actually I had a feeling it was a long time frame we were talking about here, because that would make sense in that she's admitting that she maybe doesn't really see this person very often, if at all. Maybe she's also admitting that she doesn't give enough to the relationship or to the building of it, that it's not right for them to fall for her. She isn't really putting enough out there. She's being too passive in letting things happen to her, and instead she should be making more of an effort and, coming around a little more. Towards the end, we've got this sing-song lullaby, distorted vocal moment. I'm sitting in my brother's room, haven't slept in a week or two. I think I might have fallen in love. What am I to do? Well, one thing I can tell you, Billy Girl, as someone who sleeps too much, get some sleep, because a week or two without sleeping, I can't even imagine. I barely go 24 hours in my entire life without sleeping. Like, I am such an oversleeper. I have the exact opposite problem. And so I cannot imagine not sleeping for that long. It's like one thing that I know people who are more, neurodivergent or have mental health issues, they always have some issue with sleep. And usually it's that they don't sleep enough, or like, go through, are insomniacs. For me, it's the opposite problem. I have the issue of constantly sleeping and having trouble getting out of bed. So that's another issue. But anyway, can't quite relate, but I can definitely relate to the, melancholic, lamentative energy of this track. I mean, it's hit me right in the feels. It's just a beautiful guitar moment. Very simple song, but very stirring. So, Not My Responsibility, track 9, is less of a song and more of a meditative reflection or essay on body positivity in the music industry, particularly when it comes to women, as well as, just the idea of fame and public perception of an individual, the, ways in which objectification of women has often been, conflicting with ethical ways of portraying the true nature of someone. And it's time and time again been the way of things. Billie has grown up in the spotlight wearing baggy clothing, and she made a point of that until she was 18 years old, to say, like, you've never seen my body, but yet you still judge it. Because when she finally did start posting about a year ago photos of herself, not even a year ago, when she turned 18, she started posting pictures of herself, showing more of her skin. There were people had things to say, which of course, Billie is really famous. People are going to say what they're going to say. You can't get too bogged down about what someone's going to, you can't control that. But it is a part of the larger narrative of the media, and it is something that a lot of journalists fall into, and publications and things that she's calling out, and of course in her fans as well, and saying, look, it's not okay that you do this, but it's ultimately not my problem, and she's absolving herself of all of the weight and all of the baggage that comes with that. I mean, she is truly feeling herself. She sounds just very comfortable in her own skin, in her very silky, but very like seductive, but it's also, you can tell underneath it that it is coming from a place of like bold self-empowerment, and that she is really owning every word she says in this little diatribe here. And it was used as a part of a tour footage that she would include during the middle of her Where Do We Go tour, which got, of course, postponed because of COVID. And so she even released the visuals on her social media. So it sounded familiar. I feel like I had seen it before. But I think it's brilliant. It's not really something I personally haven't heard before. I think women all over the industry are saying the same thing, which is so important, and that we need more of it. Billie's bringing her own unique style to it. And I do, of course, also love Finneas's just wave synth that comes up and down, undulating underneath it, giving it a very meditative feel. You have opinions about my opinions, about my music, my clothes, my body. I think it's channeling something that, I think Madonna has been very outspoken about, and she would probably be one of the foremost women in pop music. She was doing this way back in the 90s on like albums like Bedtime Stories and Erotica. Would you like it if I was a man? Would you, oops, I didn't think I could talk about this. You don't like when I talk about that. Like, really exposing the hypocrisy of mainstream media, the sexism, the misogyny, the objectification. I mean, again, it's so important. And Billie looks wonderful, but the fact that people are going to come for her for all of these things, it's absolutely absurd. The pressure that celebrities are put under, and just not just celebrities, but just women in general and men, body image, politics, policing. These things can be really toxic sometimes, and often the times they are, especially when it comes to body image, and it is so corrosive and pervasive. And on the next track, she sort of even more conceptualizes it by linking it to social media, which I really love. So Overheated is sort of like the sister song in a way that, it's kind of a continuation in that it's sampling more of the synth that was used underneath Billie's part in Not My Responsibility. Overheated, of course, ups the tempo and makes a really wonderfully crafted propulsive beat for a Billie track, but it carries on the same thematic. And it's referencing issues that she's had with the paparazzi. I don't really even know how it happened. I started talking, they started laughing. I started watching them photographing. I started walking, I gave no reaction. I'm overheated, can't be defeated, can't be deleted, can't unbelieve it. And she's just calling out paparazzi culture. She's calling out Instagram culture, influencer culture, the plastic inanimate bitches, as she calls it. Why don't you get sick of posing for pictures on Instagram constantly? I didn't get a surgery to help out. I mean, she's really going there. And I personally, I love seeing this. I know some people might, have things to say about her calling out surgery and stuff, because it's a bit of a divisive thing, I think, in like LA culture for sure. But I think most of us can agree that like it's gone way too far, that, the ways in which body modification has also kind of co-opted into male sexual objectification of women. And we've kind of somehow in mainstream culture made it sound like this is empowering for women to want to get butt implants, to want to, edit their features so uncannily well in a simple app on an Instagram photo without needing all of the money and resources of Photoshop. It just is, it's really frightening where we've come. And, in the past, it was just, the media doing it to us, but now we're doing it to ourselves in the way we advertise ourselves online. And so many women in particular fall for it. And it's really sad. And obviously it's not Billie's lane. So she's never going to go in that direction. And she's just really frustrated that she is being compared to these people, that people are talking about her body, that she's just really frustrated and she's fed up. She's overheated. This song has definitely grown on me. Like the first time I heard it, I don't think I was fully involved and invested in the story she was telling. So I didn't really take as much from it, but the melody and the repetitiveness, it's kind of grown on me now. I think it's catchier now to me. And although not one of the better up-tempo songs for me, it's still a strong one. Everybody Dies. This was probably the track title when I saw the list of all the songs that I was most intrigued by, just because of how nihilistic it was. And I love a nihilistic moment here. Billie said in a quote, "It makes me feel happy and sad at the same time that all things come to an end." And I think that that's something I meditate and think about quite a lot in my life. I love that she's making a song about it. If people thought that this album was going to be just her having fun with her girlfriends and saying F you to boyfriends, no, she is still going there. She is relaying dark, deep, depressive thoughts that a lot of people, particularly people who are struggling with anxiety or depression, are constantly mulling over. Everybody dies, surprise, surprise. We tell each other lies. Sometimes we try to make it feel like we might be right. We might not be alone. Everybody dies, that's what they say. And maybe in a couple hundred years, they'll find another way. I just wonder why you'd want to stay if everybody goes. You'd still be alone. I don't want to cry. Some days I do, but not about you. It's just a lot to think about, the world I'm used to. The one I can't get back, at least not for a while. I sure have a knack for seeing life more like a child. It's not my fault. It's not so wrong to wonder why. Everybody dies. And when will I? That hit me really hard. It's not too often that I see such brutally honest songwriting and it's not, abstracted out to have a million different meanings because of really dense poetry, that I hear an artist pontificate so vocally about when they're going to end on this earth. I think that as emo as that sounds, it's very kind of important to hear, portrayed in a song like this to make someone not feel so alone if they're also contemplating these dark thoughts, because it is something that's kept me up at night quite a lot, and also it's something that ties into, the feeling of like romance and like thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to spend all of the rest of my time with this person. I think sometimes it can be very overwhelming to like think about, gosh, if ideally this romance pulls through, I might be with this person until the day I die, however long that might be from now. And that's really frightening to think about because it's like even if you like it, it is somewhat like a cage, and that can like make you feel like you've already sort of the signed the contract on the rest of your life, and it makes you think about mortality in a way that I think as a young person can be really bit of an adjustment to get thinking of, because when you're so young you think, oh, I don't know what my future has in store for me, there's so many different paths that I have yet to choose to take. But as you get older, you start to realize that you're making choices that could potentially narrow down the possible life that goes ahead of you, to the point where maybe you could already see how your life could span out for the rest of your time until you die, assuming you die at an old age, ideally. And that's really frightening to think about. So I think she's really processing like the two negative emotions, which is fear of death and fear of being alone. She's balancing those two out and sort of saying, like, okay, these are both really dark, negative things. But at the same time, like, we always think, like, oh, well, being alone is the one way that, like, it's not going to be the way we want to go forward. Like, I don't want to be alone. I'm going to combat my fear of death by making sure that I'm not alone. But it's a double-edged sword because there is a freedom to being alone, and you will ultimately be alone. It's like you might as well get used to it. I don't know. I really love how she is weighing these two negatives, these two sort of dark concepts, and it is very nihilistic, and it's a bit of a gut punch to any sort of romantic attributes she was having in any of the other tracks. But hey, this is a process of all of the emotions that she's been going through, and I really appreciate this. This song is once again not really at all about the production, although it is there. There's some very atmospheric, heavy synth coming underneath. There's some moments where it really reminds me of, there's this Canadian producer, artist named TR-ST. It's really hard to pronounce his stage name, but Robert Alphonse. It's giving me it's giving me vibes of his music. It's also giving me a little bit of Yona Lee, the Swedish alternative electronic artist, with her song Here Is a Warning, a similar sort of echoing, ambient, meditative ballad that she is serving us here, which punctuates certain phrases and elevates them to really tug at the heart. And I think that it's one of the most brilliant songs because of it, but probably the most painful. Very painful, very plaintive. You ought to know that even when it's time, you might not want to go, but it's okay to cry and it's all right to fold. But you are not alone. You are not unknown. I think ending it with that, that comforting sentiment is the ultimate blanket to assuage, to comfort those late night worries and fears that might come to you. And again, Billie singing about it, I think, is very comforting to hear for me personally. And I think it is for many people who are also struggling with these kinds of emotions. And it's a heavy, heavy topic. It's a heavy topic. But I'm glad that Billie's not afraid to go there. As Billie says, this song is a big bummer. Billie has also commented that she feels like there's a very blue energy to this song, like the color. She usually hears that color and she smells rain when she's listening to it. It's just very interesting sort of sensory experience that she's acknowledging for us here. Okay, so the next track is Your Power, which was one of the singles, technically the third single that was released. And this one is the one that most, I think, directly involves and talks about her own past trauma in abusive relationships. There's speculation that this is about a specific, person, producer in Hollywood, or a guy who dated when she was 16. But she's confirmed that it isn't about specifically one person, but she hopes that this song, along with sort of like the Me Too movement, is garnering that sort of energy and momentum to make women feel more powerful and stand up to the abuse that they have been subjected to for eons. The music video, she's coddling and sort of seductively playing with this, snake, which I think symbolizes so much of the, power dynamic that she's talking about, in that she's playing with something that is so dangerous and venomous and could easily kill her in some ways. But yet there's this seductive back and forth between the two of them, which I think illustrates the unfortunate power dynamic that a lot of these males have in positions of power to women in the industry, but also just in general relationships everywhere, in which it's all fun and sexual and seductive until consent is not fully given and it turns into something very venomous and deadly. And, the power is always abused. The power that unfortunately men often have, in so many different forms, whether it's financially, physically, contractually. There's so many aspects in which women have not had the same level of power. And so that dynamic being displayed with the snake, I think, is brilliant. And it's a very mournful song. It's so downy. It's such a Debbie Downer kind of song, and plaintive and melancholic. The guitar is just breezing along, and just adding that ambiance. Her vocals soaring off into the sky. Again, I don't think a lot of us expected to see so much of from Billie, as so many more of these songs opt for very minimal, if any, production and very stripped back, a kind of acoustic moments, which we wouldn't have really thought of from her first record. So I haven't ever, by the way, I need to caution this by saying I have never heard her entire EP that came out back in 2017. Don't Look at Me, is it called? Don't Smile at Me. I've never actually heard that EP, so I should be quiet when I say she's never made music like this, because that might not be necessarily true. I believe I have seen a music video for one of the songs. It was just a long time ago. I really should refamiliarize myself with that music. The next track, NDA, another single. Another song talking about fame and how everyone wants to write about who she's with, who she's dating. And so she jokes about, if I ever was to be with someone, I would make them sign an NDA. And yeah, sometimes she just really wishes, and she says this on a lot of songs. She actually, that she wasn't so famous, she actually references the titles of a lot of her songs. She's saying, I'm getting older now, I'm thinking about my future now, I didn't change my number, I'm happier than ever. She's referencing a lot of themes and titles from her previous songs on this record, which I think is really interesting. And then the way this song finally explodes and opens up with the vocal distortion and the moments where the electro clash comes in really strong. It's a welcome respite from some of the lighter instrumentals that we've gotten throughout the rest of this record. It picks up the tempo, which leads us into Therefore I Am. Therefore I Am is sort of like the poster child pop song on this record. I think it's easy to say. I think it's a perfectly inoffensive song in that it's perfect for TikTok. You can have dances to it. You can choreograph and have a fun radio moment with the song. And yet the song actually has meat and substance to it as well, that I think also ties into the entire record wonderfully. And I think it was smart to put it towards the end of the record, because it's like putting at the back half of the record a very self-empowering track. I love the music video. She's just having fun in this mall that she got to all to herself, so you can have the Auntie Annie's pretzels and her drink in hand and just have fun going through the stores. She's also not taking herself so seriously in the song. I think that, again, she is just kind of just playing around with the idea of irreverence and sticking up for yourself and just saying middle fingers up, I am who I am. If you don't like it, suck it, And I think that irreverence is something a lot of the youth of today, I think, in Gen Z, are going to really latch on to, but of people of all generations, of course. And I think that, again, it was a smart choice for an early single, but it was so different from My Future. But again, we expected some of the songs to be upbeat, right? And some of the singles to be the more upbeat ones. So I think she admits that she doesn't have so much meaning loaded behind this song. She just wanted to make a song that was fun and carefree, and the music video reflects that, with a little bit more of that hallmark, guttural, demonic voice hidden underneath the soft, sultry whisper tones that she delivers in the production that we've come accustomed to from her first record. So the penultimate track, which really should be the closing track on this record, is the title track, Happier Than Ever. We open up with a very familiar lilting, almost a ukulele tune, leading us through the verses here. Since I've been away from you, I am happier than ever. I wish I could explain it better. Wish it wasn't true. And, explaining that it's just in her bones. She knows this person was bad news, that she can't be with them. She doesn't have a distinct reason why, But at the same time, looking back, there are so many things that accumulated that just made her resent this person more and more. And I think the lyrics, I think, very relatably kind of portray how I think many of us have felt in a relationship after it's gone kaputs. And as we seek into the second verse and the third into the outro, this song really opens up. We have a really explosive electronic rock moment, and I think it caught a lot of us by surprise. I think, it's interesting, and I really don't want to make this comparison because it's kind of unfair, but Olivia Rodrigo has a song called Happier on her new record. I'm not the hugest Olivia Rodrigo fan. She's great. Don't have anything negative to say, just not really into it. But I did like that song. And I'll be honest with you, there are moments as she goes into the slightly more, the more, well, very not slightly more, but very intensely more electro rock part of this song. There are times where she sounds a little bit like Olivia. And even the melody, I think, kind of comes a little into similar territory. I know it's like, I'm not saying anything. I'm just like commenting on the things it made me think about. But regardless, it's something that Billie hasn't done before, at least to my knowledge. And it's something I know a lot of the fans from seeing the reaction are really into. And it's something that I do think it served really well for the outro of all of that pent up energy, because I think otherwise we were just sort of getting a similar sort of minimally acoustic song that we've seen done in other tracks on this record. But this explosion at the end really, really lands home what she's trying to say and expresses just all of that pent up frustration that you have and rage at all of the wasted time and all of the things you sacrificed for this person that ended up not doing anything of the same level of effort or commitment for you back. And you're just smacking yourself going, why, oh, why did I get so blinded by this person and let them bulldoze me like this? It's just such a brilliant cathartic moment to round out this record. And I think that, again, showcasing how Finneas can really take a song into a rock direction for her is just a really great avenue that maybe she'll explore more of. Maybe I've heard some people say Billie wants to do more rock music. First, I mean, like, it's not always my cup of tea, the, metal side of things, but at the same time, like, I'm actually really buying this and I'm really enjoying it. And it does make it one of the best songs on the record. So props to Billie for experimenting and that paying off so wonderfully. Just fucking leave me alone. And we seek out, Billie out, mic drop. Only it's not the mic drop moment. We get one more song, perhaps the most lackluster song on the record, Male Fantasy. This song should totally have been either scrapped or placed somewhere else in the track listing, because it really is an abrupt change of pace, and it breaks the sort of power that was had on that ending. Male Fantasy is lyrically sort of just about her looking through, watching porn after reflecting on a breakup that she's had. Again, tying it into, the objectification of women in the porn industry to appeal to the male gaze, tying this into the theme of songs like Not My Responsibility. And of course, also referencing the fact that real love is not often portrayed properly by the media. I can't stand the dialogue, she says in this porn scene she's watching. She would never be that satisfied. It's a male fantasy. I'm going back to therapy. I mean, it's a great, another minute of self-reflection for her. But I just, again, don't think sonically it fits really well with the closing aspect that weight of the closing song should have. It's whimsical and it's a nice melody, but it's not standing out as much, I think, as some of the others. And so I think I've heard a lot of people say that this song is kind of the one skip of the record. Again, I wouldn't skip it. I would just put it somewhere else. If you wanted to put another song in its place, maybe you could put Everything I Wanted, though I'm not entirely sure if that song would necessarily fit after Happier Than Ever either. It's, Everything I Wanted is quite a heavy song. Maybe it would go after Everybody Dies to really talk about putting the two heavy emo songs next to each other, right? But that being said, Everything I Wanted deserved to be on this record. It sonically fits in the rest of the record, and I think it would thematically fit as well, so I'm not entirely sure why it was omitted. But yeah, I would put Happier Than Ever at the end. Maybe even just swap the two. Male Fantasy, then Happier Than Ever. End the record. a wonderful project. I think a really cohesive project, one that really doesn't feel like it's runtime. Some of the songs are shorter, so I think that helps, but you don't feel like any of it drags. I mean, mainly because there's so many switch ups and there's so many moments and interludes and points where the songs transform that none of the songs ever stay too similar for like a long period of time. And she takes you on such a journey that it does feel somewhat chronological, and there's such a theme to it. There's references in the lyrics to other songs, breakout moments of brilliant experimentation, but it's still Billie, still always as recognizably as her as ever. And I think also a great record for people who maybe haven't been so accustomed to Billie before and maybe have been a little bit put off by some of the big singles that were very all over the radio and wanted to explore the deeper side of her. I think this album is actually far more accessible in that regard. And when I say accessible, I don't mean that she's sold out to not be as abstract or as interesting. I just mean that, you know, this album is a lot more focused on just her voice, the beauty of it, and the production being, I think, a less is more approach, and really selling some really wizened, emotive lyricism that I think really is very telling for youth culture of today. So I think this is a really brilliant project and one of the better albums that I have heard cohesively this year. So I am very excited to see where she continues in her upcoming journey. I just hope that even if she does take a long break from music, as she's sort of hinting at on some of these songs, wanting to do, I hope that she doesn't give it up altogether, because I think that there's so much untapped potential, as I think a lot of young artists have, to grow and continue to make wonderful music. I just love the direction she's going in here. So those are my thoughts. What are yours? This was a longer video. There was a lot to talk about. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know. Remember, it's just my opinion. My favorite songs, I would definitely say, are Your Power, Oxytocin, Billie Bossa Nova, Everybody Dies, Gold Wing. Those are probably the top 5. Happier Than Ever, how could I forget? Top 6 songs. Maybe even swap out Everybody Dies with Happier Than Ever. I'm not sure. I love so many of the songs so much. What are your favorites? What are your thoughts? I will see you all in my next video. I hope you enjoyed this one. Please give it a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you are new. And like I said, my review of My Future will be linked in the description, as well as a video where I talk about her debut album. And those are there if you're interested. I hope you all have a wonderful, blessed day. I'll see you on the next one. Peace, love, and light. Bye.